one of the questions is how do we make healthy eating cool? And some work that we've just done with Martinstead and Sterling, we know that actually only geeks eat healthy food, okay, in secondary school. So how do we get over that challenge? In terms of the responsibility deal, in physical activity, if the industry's involved, that's more people, more active. So that's, in theory, more profit. How do we transfer that to food? And my last point is the concern that actually in some of the food industry, the physical activity is used as the diversion. So how do we get around this and do both sides of the energy balance?
Okay, so let me just try and answer, if I may. Number one, the responsibility deal has its own extremely tough professor, Susanna Gill. And her responsibility is to hold the food sector to account. And in the Department of Health, I believe there is something like Nutritionist and Obesity team, 70. And in the physical activity team, there are 3. So I tend to champion physical activity.
Right, I think it's a rather depressing state of affairs if we have to make foods and healthy foods cool. I think we've already lost the battle. I don't think we do, and I think it deploys resources where it doesn't need to be. Kind of using role models has been shown to be helpful, and Brian Wansink has shown that classifying foods in terms of superheroes and dinosaurs increases likability and acceptance. So we've got that piece of research there. But I think really, just to kind of labour the point, for most children, the real heroes are their parents and their brothers and sisters, and exposure-based mechanisms works very effectively in the family, and we should be devoting time to making that happen, because then we won't need to make cool and spend multi-million pounds on designing cool dinosaur characters. It will just happen, and we will dissolve the need for those kind of interventions.
I think also the evidence from what we know of literature in relation at least to weight management is that if you want to elevate physical activity and let energy intake look after itself, that's an awful lot of physical activity. So we really need to look at both energy intake and energy expenditure. And we need to focus on how to engage people with making those behaviour changes at multiple levels. So I must admit, I'm slightly sceptical that industry per se would plug a gap left by other agencies. I think it's a much more involved process at all levels of society.
And I just want to add to that in the context of working with overweight and obese children and young people. And in a sense, the public health physical activity campaigns, as well as the commercial physical activity promotion campaigns, are all very good, but they fundamentally miss the needs of overweight and obese young people, and in a sense often exclude them, and they're not the children that are adopting these forms of physical activity, which are absolutely critical to their long-term behaviour change for a whole manner of benefits, more than just energy expenditure. But unfortunately, they are excluded in pretty much every single level and at every single intervention that I've ever come across, unless they're directly focused on overweight and obese young people. And I know this because I work with children who have a significant obesity problems that tell us that in the environments we create, and in other weight management providers, the environments they create are the only environments where they would be confident in being physically active. And so I think there is huge scope there, but the scope is often focused on those that are already going to be physically active and are likely to maintain some degree of physical activity in the future, or have competencies which mean that they're likely to re-engage in physical activity at a later date if they so need it.
Yeah. Could I add to that also government policy? In the behaviour change wheel I presented this morning, I talked about 7 different policy categories. And if one thinks about the opportunities that are needed for physical activity, especially amongst young people, and also look at what government policy has been doing, things like playing fields have been sold off for many years, and that deprives people of the opportunity, children, the opportunity to play. And sports facilities, youth clubs, community facilities where active play and different activities can happen are also being sold off. So I think that one does have to look at things in the round, and sometimes there's a way in which one can concentrate on certain things and say, well, business has got a responsibility to do something that actually is not incentivised to do, as a distraction from putting pressure on government to actually take responsibility for public health.
Ken, did you want to add something? I think there's one more question.
Please. I think, I've been trying to promote physical activity for a long, long time. I've got the lines to prove it, since the 70s, actually. And it's been really a tough road for us to go down, and it still is a tough road. And Fred's right, there are 3 people in the Department of Health who are responsible for physical activity promotion. So as much as we would like it, it really hasn't happened for us at the level that we really need, even though vast amounts of evidence are there, and the CMOs across the UK have signed up to it. It's all there is the evidence that we should be investing more in physical activity. It's not happened. So that must continue, and all of you out there need to continue that fight, because it won't happen otherwise. Underpinning this conversation, largely because of Fred's very strong presentation there about this point, is should we work with industry to help us on that? I have to say that actually we do need help, and I support Fred on this notion. You have to live with the notion of whether you can work with industry or not. I actually presented, I'm not sure you were here, a case where I have worked with a company to try to improve their practice and take advantage of their access to a really important population. And I actually work with other industry as well. I'm on the Coca-Cola scientific advisory panel. Why? Because personally, I think I can make more of a difference by being in there than being out. And I get criticised for it, but I've never taken money off Coca-Cola personally for research or whatever, but I advise, and I'm in there knowing what's going on. So either we work with that group of people who have far more money than we're likely ever to get from government, or we abandon the idea and we take the cynical approach and say, no, they're not for us. And it's clear where my position is, and you all have to think about that very carefully, because particularly the nutrition group, which are the dominant group here, are very anti-industry. And, we have to figure out how we can work with them, in my view, in a way that is acceptable. So we don't have to accept bad practice, but we can look for good practice and work for partnerships.
But isn't there are we not getting distracted here? Because it seems that the argument is going down the line that big industry and big books will solve this. I do think we should work with industry, obviously.
Not everybody does.
But that isn't. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is most people still don't change their behaviour, because the evidence is that they are not changing their behaviour in modern society. So if every initiative that we've tried to date isn't going to work, are we sure that the big books are going to make it work, or are we going to still be having this discussion in 10 or 20 years' time?
The argument's going to be there regardless. Yeah. What we're saying is take the money, we'll still use our expertise and employ it the best way that we can. So the argument hasn't gone away, has it?
Because physical activity is on the floor as a population. We expend about 1.4 to 1.7 times our basal metabolic rate. It can't get much lower. Is there something to say about the forces which are pulling physical activity down? And are those forces so gravitational that it needs more than an injection of cash to pull it back up?
Probably does.
Okay, I'm going to have to draw this to a close. I personally think it's been a fascinating day. I think we've had some terrific presentations, bringing both the practicalities and the theory together. I think the last comment about industry and working together for the public good is an issue that's been around for donkey's years. It's certainly been around when I was training, and I think we go up and down. And I would say I think one of the areas where the BNF has been particularly successful is in finding the common ground where multi-partnerships can develop, whether it's industry, government and interested people and health professionals working together to try and move the whole agenda forward. So for those of you who are nutrition students coming up, just think very carefully about the involvement with any type of partnership, because personally I think partnership has to be the way forward, but it has to be in very clear parameters, and it has to be about using the skills for the public good rather than perhaps just using brand good. They don't necessarily need to be diverse, but it is how you actually make that happen. That would be my personal opinion. However, I'd like to ask the audience to first of all thank all the speakers for some terrific presentations.